Alright, so in this video we're going to continue on with some tags. Here's kind of an outline of what we're going to do. We're going to use our text editor again. You can use Notepad++ or on the PC, or Text Wrangler on the Mac, or something else if you want. Just remember to always save as text only or plain text, not rich text or Word or anything like that. If you save as a format that's not plain text or text only, then you'll have some problems. You'll have weird characters show up. Let's see what else. We're also going to do a template. So we'll make a page that we can use as a template, to starter page, so we don't have to type the same thing over and over every time we make a new page. We'll go through some more block level tags. We've seen some others earlier, I believe. We'll go through some basic inline tags. We'll talk about types of lists if we get to that. Maybe special characters. We might split this up into more than one video, but you'll see at the end. And that's probably good. So, alright, so here we are. This is a page that you probably saw before, maybe not. But what we're going to do is use this as a template. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to save and say save as, not save, but save as, and save it as another page. So I'm just going to call this, for now, I'll call it page 2. And now we've got a new page there. And what I'm going to do is strip out everything except for the basic page, which is that. So I deleted everything from after the start of the body tag to the closing body tag. So everything inside the body basically deleted. And then we have this. And I will change the title to, what should we call this? Let's call this inline tags, or more tags. How about that? More tags. Always more tags. So that looks good. That's sort of a basic file that you can use as a template. Instead of typing all this every time, you can just save it. So I'm going to save this. I'll save it as, and I'm saving this as template, so I can have this later. So now I've saved that as template. And so there we go. So all it has is, and I might have to save it again because I don't want to type over my template, but we'll do that in a second. So actually, let's do that now. So let's go to File, Save As, and I'll just replace the page 2, which is the one that I saved it in the first place. So I'm going to save over the page 2. So now I have my original page was already still there. I made a template file out of this, and now this is page 2. So my template file, if I look inside that folder, here's the folder. Here's the file I started with. I did a save as. I should have done a save as and saved it as a template instead of page 2, but same effect. And then I saved the template as page 2. So now I have a template that I can always start with, and I have my old page that I started with in the very beginning, and then I have a new page that's my one I'm working on now, if that makes sense. So really, just make a template out like this and then save it as your new file. And then always save as when you save your template. Okay, so just a review from before. Here's my doc type tag. This is an HTML5 document. You may see some XHTML documents on some of these videos, and some of them are HTML. This is an HTML5 doc type tag, so it just has, again, the exclamation doc type space HTML. That's the HTML5 doc type. And that tells the browser, again, what version of HTML you're writing this in. Yeah. And then we have our HTML tag, which opens there and closes here, that around everything almost. Then we have our head, which opens there and closes there. Inside of that is the character set. That's the set of characters used to render the page, UTF or Unicode 8. We have our title, which is more tags that will show up in our title bar or our tab. And then we have our body, which is where most of the stuff is going to go. So this is a good template file we could use and never type this stuff again, except you're going to change the title probably. Right. Okay. So now I need to open this file. I'm just going to go to my browser, go to File, Open, and find that file. Here we go. Page 2. And there it is. So all I should see on there is the title, which is more tags, and there's more tags there. All right, great. So let's continue on. So we're going to do some more some block level tags again. So I'm going to make a heading. Remember we did headings before. And we will say more block level tags. A couple more we're going to do. We're not going to do them all, but we'll do some of the important ones. So there's our H2, which itself is a block level tag. So if I save that, remember Command S or Control S on the PC to save, or File Save, same thing. And then I go over here, and then I click the refresh or reload button, or I hit Command R or Control R, and I should see that. If you don't see it, something's wrong. You're not looking at the same file in both places. Remember that we're writing our page here, and we're looking at it here. Two different applications looking at the same file. All right. So let's see. Let's continue on with a division or div tag. So let's go div. This is a division tag. It is so I'm going to kind of describe these in the code here, or in the content, so you can kind of know what they are. It's a general block element. It is used a lot with CSS. And then I'll close that div tag. All right. So we've got div, which is short for division. It's a general block element, means it creates a rectangular container, whether you can see it or not. And it's used a lot with CSS. So most containers, of the big containers on a page that hold like the different parts of the page, the header, the footer, all that kinds of stuff, is inside of a div at this point. There are some others that we will talk about in a second that are newer HTML5 containers, but they are kind of just, at the time of this video, they are just starting to be used, and they aren't really supported completely. So we're going to stick probably with generic div tags for a little longer. If you go to, let's just a little aside here, if you go to a website like CNN or something, and you view the source, which is Command U, I think, on this one. Yeah. And then, so this is the source. This is the HTML for that page. And if I say Command F for find and look for div, you see there's a div tag there. Well, watch how many div tags there are. Let's see. I'll highlight all. All those are div tags. That's a lot of code in there, huh? But all these pink things or purple are div tags. So a lot of div tags are used currently for containers on web pages. I don't even know how many there are. There's a lot. Okay, so that's an important one. You'll see that one again. Okay, let me go to the next sentence here. We'll do a paragraph. Remember, that's another block level element. I'm just going to type a little paragraph for notes for you guys about the newer containers. So we'll say new block level elements in HTML5. And I type slow, so you guys are lucky there. Include, and these are, I'm going to put a break there just to go to the next line. Remember the BR for the break. So we'll just put them here. So let's see, section is one, article, there's one for footer, there's one for header, there's one for aside, and there's one for nav. And there may be some others, but and then I'm going to say these are semantic containers used to define areas of content. and are also called sectioning elements. Did I spell everything wrong? There we go. Elements. So section, article, footer, header, aside, and nav. These are semantic containers used to define areas of content and are also, typo, see, called sectioning elements. So what does that mean? So semantic means meaning. What does that mean? That means that these are containers that have a certain, the name of the tag has a certain meaning as far as the content goes. So it's not how it looks, it's what it means. So a section is a section of something, like a section of an article or a section of a page. It's a little vague. You can kind of use it in different ways. An article is, like it sounds, it's like an article, like say on CNN or something. So that may have an article tag around it. Article, the way you can think of an article is if the content can be repurposed, maybe shown on in a different way, maybe in a newspaper or somewhere else, as one distinct piece of content, that may get an article tag around it. It's kind of for reusing content in different locations. That's kind of what it's for, I think. There's also a one for footer. So generic footer that goes at the bottom. Here's the CNN page again. Here's the footer down here. So they made one in HTML5 called footer because so many people had, before people were using generic divs and giving it an ID, which we'll talk about later, called footer. So they made a tag called footer. And they also made one for a header because most websites have a header. This is the header area up here. You can have more than one header too and more than one footer as well, but that's a different type of generic container, but it's actually a header, the beginning of a section or beginning of a part of the page. An aside is a tag that's supposed to be used for like a sidebar or relevant information, but it's not the main information. That's what an aside is for. And then nav is a container that you can use for navigation, primary navigation. So going back to CNN, a nav tag might be around this, if that makes sense. Behaviorally, all these usually act like a generic div, but they have more meaning than a div because a div could be anything, right? Could be any of these. But each of these has a separate kind of meaning, different than just a plain old div. All right, that's probably good enough on that. Okay, so let's move on. Oh, we have to finish our paragraph. So remember we said before, you always have to close every tag, right? So I started a paragraph here, so this is the paragraph about these new block level elements, so I have to close that paragraph here. All right, so let's move down. I'm going to do as we did before, I think, and add a few line breaks in here to push the body and HTML tags down a little bit so you can so we can put more code in here and we have space for it. All right, so the next thing we're going to do is put in an HR, which is a horizontal rule. So I could just put in HR like that, save it, and then I'll go back to my page and refresh. And there's our page so far. So here's our H2, here's our division. You can see it. All it does is create line breaks. It is a block level tag, so it has some space above and below it by default. Doesn't have to. You can change that with CSS. And here's our paragraph with our new sectioning elements from HTML5. Okay, so then I put in HR, and that creates this horizontal rule. Now, before, HR in the old days used to be just for that, making a horizontal rule. But now it's supposed to separate sort of areas of content, like a thematic change, I guess it's called. And so I'm going to use it here because we're kind of done with our block level elements for now. There are more, like I said, but we'll come back maybe later and talk about some more. But now we're going to do some inline elements that don't create a rectangle, don't create a box. They just flow inline left to right, top to bottom. So, so that's the HR. We can add a little bit of, let me show you quickly how we can change this a little bit with CSS. So we did this a little bit before. We added the style attribute, and then I'm going to say width of 50%, and then a semicolon, and I'm going to say float right. And this float thing is the way that you can make something right aligned. Not text, but some object like this. HR. So what did I do? I added style equals. That tells the browser that everything after this equal sign is going to be CSS, as I think we've done before. And then we have two instructions. We have a property and a value, a property and a value. We're going to set the width of this HR to 50%. And 50% of what? We'll show that in a second. And then we will float that HR to the right. What does that mean? It basically aligns it right. So there used to be an align attribute. I guess it's still okay to use it, but it's kind of being phased out or being deprecated. Deprecated means it's being phased out. And you would use float instead. So float's kind of a replacement for align in CSS. And so let's see what this looks like. So I'm going to save this and then refresh. And now the HR is 50% the width of the browser. See how it's only half as wide as the browser now? It's not fully wide. And it's on the right. So that's what that did. So percent is another unit that you can use with CSS. So it's 50% of what? It's 50% of the containing element. Right now the containing element, since it's not in anything else, this HR is not inside of something else, the containing element is the browser window itself, or the viewport, if you want to call it that. All right, so just threw that in there to show you can modify. We used you can modify different things with the same properties in CSS, and we'll get to a lot more of that. All right, so let's add another H2 below that. And it's going to have a little issue probably, so I'll show you what I mean in a second. So let's say these are some inline tags. Let's put these are some text level, because these are mostly text modifying tags. So these are some text level inline tags, and I'll close that H2. Let's see if we get the problem that I'm thinking we might get. I'm going to save, and I'm going to refresh. Maybe not. Well, I'm going to add one thing anyway, even though I'm not really seeing the mistake or the problem I was thinking I was going to see. When you float things, it can sort of mess with the things that follow. For instance, if I floated this, I could have some things kind of run into it or run above it. It causes things that follow to sort of flow around it, basically. And maybe I'm seeing it, but maybe I'm not here. But to prevent that, and we're going to talk more about this much more. This is related to CSS layout, actually. Layout with CSS. We're going to add a little bit of CSS to make sure that everything works correctly. So we're going to say style equals clear both to the H2 that we just made. So what does that do? Let's see if anything even changes. So I said style equals clear both. And remember, I could put that last semicolon on there or not. If I wanted to add something else later, I would need this semicolon. There's a semicolon between each of these declarations. Okay, let's see what happens. Anything at all? Aha! Did happen. So this changed a little bit. So what that does when we say style equals clear both, what that does is kind of get you out of the floating situation where things are trying to wrap around. You'll see that more later when we talk about layout. So when I say style equals clear both, it basically says whatever this code is on, the H2, this H2 right here, it pushes it below everything that was floated above it. So it kind of gets you out of the float weirdness. I know it's a little strange, but you might have to do that if things act strangely when you're doing floats, and they will eventually act strangely. So you say clear both, and that the way I think of it is when I say clear both, the object is going to look for a clear left and right margin. So it's going to go down until it gets a clear left and right margin. So that's that. All right. All right, so let's do a span. So I'm going to go down here, and we'll say span. This is a span. It is used a lot with CSS, just like we said with the div, right? So this is a span. Let me see what it looks like here. It will look like really nothing. The reason it looks like nothing is because a span is sort of a generic inline tag, which means it doesn't have, well, it actually doesn't have any styles of its own at all that I know of. So you can put a span around something and it doesn't do anything. If I took the span off, it would look exactly the same. So why have this tag in the first place? Well, what it can do is we could add CSS to this. So again, I could say style equals blah, 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 and I would be able to apply some styles to this text that's in between the span. So for that reason, it's used a lot with CSS, like the generic div that we talked about earlier. I should go back just for a second and say what inline means, or describe it a little more. So inline means instead of forming a container or a rectangle, it just flows in line. It's called the normal flow from left to right, and then when it runs out of space on the right, it just goes down to the next line. So that's what inline means. It does not form a container in the same way that block level elements do. There are rectangles around these block level elements. You can't see them yet, but they are there. This does not have a rectangle around it, or not the same kind of rectangle anyway. It's a little bit, it's not the same kind of rectangle. We'll talk about it more. Okay, so that is the span tag. Let's just throw in a few more here. Let's do a quote. So we already did a block quote. This I'll just say this is a short inline quote. That's probably good enough to describe it. And let's see what that looks like. There you go. You know what I'll do? I'll put between these inline tags, since they don't create their own line breaks, I'll put a break between each one like that. So I just put this break tag there. And now this should go to the next line. So this is a Q for quote. It's for a short inline quote. You saw it was inline because it was over here until I put a break. And in this browser, by default, it puts little quote marks around it. So you use it for quotes. If it's a longer quote, you would use the block quote tag, which we already talked about, I think. And if it's a shorter quote, you could use this little Q thing here. All right, so that is a quote. Let's move on. Let's do the break, and then we'll do strong. And I'll say this is strong text. That's probably good enough. Let's move this up a little bit. So this is strong text. And I put the break before it, so it'll go to the next line. That's what it looks like. You can see by default it's bold. It's supposed to be that you're saying it strongly, like you're kind of yelling it. That's what the strong tag is for. That's what it means. So these are all semantic tags, most of them, meaning they have some meaning. So strong means you're saying it strongly. It doesn't have to show up this way. You can make it not bold, for example. But that's what the tag means, is that it's said strongly, if you want to think of it that way. Let's do another one. This one will be, I'm going to put some more vertical space in here so we can get a little higher on the page. This one is EM. This text is emphasized. And I'll put the closing EM there. All right. So there it is. This text is emphasized. By default, it is italicized. So that's what it looks like. So when you want to emphasize something, you could use the emphasis tag. Let's put another break in there. break in there. I'll put it on the next line, and then we will go, we'll use code. This tag is code. And what it does is it looks like code. Hopefully. It should show up like this. So this again is using a monospaced font, which is a font that every letter is exactly the same size. And you could use this to represent, if you want to type some code on a page, you could put the code tag around it and it would look like that. But if you do type code on a page like this, it's not going to show up like code. It's going to show up as tags, or not show up at all. I guess what I'm getting at is you can't type this kind of stuff, tags, on a page and have it show up that way because the browser thinks it's a tag. So you have to use special characters for that, which we'll get to. So that is code. So let's put another break in there. And I'm just going to go through a few more of these. The next one is DEL. And we'll say this is deleted text. And we'll close it up. Make sure we close all those tags. And deleted text is supposed to show that you have deleted some text. Well, that makes sense, right? So let me save this and we'll take a look at it. And there it is. So you see it by default, it has a line through the middle, which means it's supposed to show that there was some text there, but it has been deleted. So all these, again, are related to the meaning of the text. So you wouldn't just actually take it out. This is to show that there was text there and you've removed it. All right, moving on. Be a little quicker here. So the next one is strike through, which ends up looking the same. This is, this is strike through. Did I spell that wrong? I did. See, I spelled it wrong. Strike through text. All right, so I'll close that one here. And that one looks like, and I put a break before that on each one of these again. So that one looks the same. Strike through text is different from deleted text meaning-wise in that strike through means it's incorrect. So that's how you can see, so you have in a situation where you have two things that look the same, the style is the same, there's a line through the middle, but they mean two different things. Deleted means it has been deleted, strike through means it's incorrect. So you would use the appropriate tag for the content. Let me scroll up again a little bit there, and then I'll put in another break. And the next one is cite, C-I-T-E. This, well, let's say this. Cite is for citations, as in a reference to another document. So yeah, okay, good. And it ends up looking italicized, but so when you cite something, you're basically saying this is a reference. You're saying who produced the original material. So if you quote something, you might use citation to say who the author was, something like that. Okay, so a few more. Let's do another break here. I don't know why I capitalize citations. You don't have to do that, but that's what it's for. Sometimes I just do stuff. I don't even know why. Or, yeah, I should know why, shouldn't I? Okay, moving on. So we have a bold tag here. This is just B. We'll say this is some bold text for adding visual attention. Ooh. Visual attention. Like for keywords, let's put that. So the bold tag was around long ago in the HTML early days, and it was used basically what was then called presentational, a presentational tag, meaning it was made to show something, the way something looked, bold, right? It was bold text. Since we don't try to use tags anymore to make things look a certain way, we use CSS for that. In HTML5, they've kind of taken the bold tag and given it a new semantic meaning, or a meaning instead of just a style like bold. So when you can use bold, and it means you want to add visual attention, which ends up being the same kind of as the old way. But yeah, so that's what the bold tag is for. Like I said, the bold tag is pretty old and used to be used a lot, and then it was kind of not used because it didn't have meaning, and now supposedly it does. You can make up your own mind on that one, I guess. Okay, another example like that, let's put in another break, is the italic tag, which is just I. We'll say this text is italicized by default and is for alternative voice or mood. Like a technical term or thought, that which we could say that. So like a technical term or thought. So kind of like you would use an italics in a document to say something is a little different or sounds a little different or to emphasize something in a certain way, you can use the I tag for that. It ends up looking italicized. Let's look at, we didn't look at those last two. Here's the bold, we didn't look at that one. So that's the bold tag, makes it look bold, makes sense. Like for keywords, you could use it for something like that. And then the italicized tag makes it look italicized. Wow, that's surprising. And but it's supposed to be like an alternative voice. You might see it used around a foreign language, for example, something like that. So that's that one. The next one is newish. Let's do a break here. And this time I'm just going to start the sentence and then put the tag around a word. So I'll say this text is marked as in highlighted. So type that. And then around that, and I'll put another break right away so I don't forget. Around the word marked, I'm going to put the new HTML5, anyway, it's new, mark tag. And no, it is not named for me. Well, maybe it was. I don't know. So this text is marked as in highlighted, and you'll see what it looks like. Whoa, that was not what I wanted to do. There we go. There we go. So it ends up looking kind of highlighted, like yellow highlighter, which is kind of cool. So if you were going to highlight something to make it, sort of stand out for the user, there's other ways to do that too, but the mark tag kind of works for that. And you could change that style too. It doesn't have to be yellow, for example, with style sheets. Okay, so that is the mark tag. We have, I think, 4 more tags you'll be happy to know. I think we'll do 4 more. So the next one is underline, which is U. U. I typed that as a capital U. I could type that way in HTML again, capitalized, but in XHTML it would have to be lowercase. A lot of developers and coders still write lowercase just because they're used to it and it's kind of more organized, I guess. I don't know if it's more organized, but they do write it in lowercase. All right, so this text is underlined, and you can probably figure out how it's going to look. Put a period there. There it is. It's underlined. So you can use it to underline text to kind of show, hey, look at this. It's got an underline on it. You have to be careful with underlines because by default, links are underlined, right? So people might think this is a link, and you don't want somebody to think something is a link that's not, because you don't want to fool your user. You want to make it easy to understand your pages. So be careful with that one for that reason. There's other ways to do underlining, by the way, too, with borders and things. We'll see that later. All right, another break tag, and then let's go with small. Oops, small. There we go. This text is small as in, I'll put small print. Has nothing to do with print really, but what I mean by small print, I spelled small wrong. What I mean by small print, let's finish that, is it's supposed to be something that's sort of less important, or the small print. So if you're reading like some advertisement or something and they put something in small print, I don't know if it's meant not to be seen, like the small print in an advertisement, but that's kind of what it means, the small print, something that is less important than the surrounding text. And that's what it does too by default. It should get smaller. Yeah, see, it got a little bit smaller, but it's not a way to size text. It means it's less important. You can size text with CSS, which we'll see. Okay, I think the last two. So this one we're going to type put the break tag in there again, and we'll just type the text, and then we're going to put two tags right around two words, and you'll see the effect. Or else you might not be able to tell what's going on with these two tags. The visual part anyway. So we'll say this is some subscript text, and this is some superscript text. And then yeah, so now what are we gonna do? Let's put around subscript, the word subscript, we'll put sub as the tag, but only around the word. So we want to close it right here. So there's the opening tag, there's the closing tag. Remember, almost all tags except for empty tags like images and breaks have a closing tag. We haven't done images yet, but you will. And this is some superscript text. So around here we're going to put sup for superscript. And let's see what happens. So there you go. So if you down here at the bottom, you can see the subscript tag makes the text drop below the line, and the superscript tags makes it go above the line. So you could use, for example, you could use superscript to write H2O, right, with the O a little bit higher than the surrounding text. It looks a little smaller actually in this browser too, but it's a little bit up to the browser about how these look sometimes. The default looks for certain tags, but you can always change all this with CSS. Okay, so that is superscript and subscript. There's also some of these things you can do as well visually with CSS. There is a way to make text go a little above the baseline or below the baseline with CSS as well. But this one has meaning. This is supposed to be superscript or subscript text. All right. I think that's a good place to end here. We will cover a lot more text tags next time. Here, remember that the book closing body tag and HTML tag were at the bottom there. And yeah, I think that's good. We went through some of the block level tags just as a review, like headings, divs, paragraphs, things like that. And we went through some inline tags. And again, inline tags mean it's going to it's not going to create a container. It's just going to apply that tag to the content in line, which means it flows left to right until it runs out of space, top to bottom. So if I go like this, I don't think I did this yet, but you can see that the text rewraps depending on how wide the browser is in this case. You'll see the text rewrapping too in some of these block elements, but the block, even though we can't see it yet, we'll see it later, is still a rectangle. Here we don't really have that rectangular block around elements, even though you can't see it. All right, I think that's it. Let's save that and see you next time.